love you, I feel good, you look great, I like you, I can't wait. A first time, a first date, you're so fine.
Hi and welcome back to the Rideshare Buddy UK website. I'm Kevin, and today I'm going to invite you along on my ride to actually find a car which I think is going to be suitable, and a deal that I think is going to be suitable for rideshare and private hire for my situation. Now, the car you choose and the deal that you choose will very much depend on the situation that you're in. There's a big range of different things you can go for. For me, I'm 61. I have an income. I'm looking at topping up that income until I get my state pension. So I'm not really looking long term. 5.5 years is the sort of deal that I'm looking at. Now, throughout my sort of private eye life, I've used different sort of models of financing a car, depending on the situation. When I first started in the 1980s, I rented a car off the company I was working for. So I paid £50 a week rent, circuit rent for the radio, and there was no commission in it. You paid your weekly rent. And then I paid £75 a week for a fully maintained and insured and licensed vehicle. That was a Vauxhall Carlton, very nice car, really enjoyed that. So that's how I started, and those deals are still around. I think I checked a local taxi company in Newport, and they charge drivers £200 a week for the car, and then they pay the commissions on any jobs and the like. Now, the one issue with that is you are restricted to the company and working for the company that you rent the car off. But it's very easy to do. There's no credit checks. So if you're just starting out, it's a good way to get into work and save some money to buy your own car. You will be given normally contract work to do to cover the cost of that car, which I don't really want to do. I don't want to do a school contract at my age and my style in life. I don't want to be getting up at 6 o'clock every morning to pick up kids to take them to school. If I want to go fishing for a day, I want to go out fishing and then maybe work a few extra hours on the weekend to make up any lost time. That's what I want. I want the flexibility. So renting from a taxi company or a private hire company, renting a settled car is not an option because, one, you wouldn't get onto Uber. No company is going to let you take their car onto another circuit. And two, I don't want a contract work. So renting the cars from a company is not an option. I've also bought cars outright. That is always going to be your cheapest option. It does involve you having to be well organised though to make sure you get your services done. It's very easy when you own your own car to miss out on a service, and that can lead to problems. You have to pay for the servicing, pay for the insurance, paying for breakdown, paying for spare parts if you get a breakdown, checking your tyres. There's a lot of work involved in owning your own car. But if I was younger, that would be the option I'd go for because I'd want the money. I'm not looking for convenience, I'm looking for the money. Same thing with leasing. Leasing is not quite as cheap to do as owning a car and slightly more expensive than taking out a bank loan. But it's okay, leasing. It's not so great at the moment. There's other finance options available. A lot of, if you buy new, a lot of manufacturers will offer low rates, which are better than leasing. But again, you've got all your paperwork to do. You've got your taxes, depreciation, licensing, looking after the car, and a lot of leasing will have mileage charges if you go above a certain mileage. Same with a lot of these contracts with manufacturers. You only get maybe 5,000 miles, after which you pay extra per mile, and that can work out quite expensive. For me, at my age, I don't want to be taking on a 5-year commitment. It may be that in a couple of years I might get sick. If I'm not got myself covered financially and insured, I'm going to be left with a big bill to pay. So it's not an option. So that's really leave two options. One is to rent from a rental company, and that's not as expensive as you might think. And the other one is use the rent to buy scheme. The rent to buy scheme is different to hire purchase in that if, say, in 2 years I became ill, I could just hand the car back and I've got nothing to worry about. There's no finance involved. But if I carry on fit and well and work my way through after 5 years, the car becomes mine. So that's an option. Uh, there's various different ones. Is insurance included, and some will have finance insurance included, some will have servicing and maintenance included, and stuff like that, and some won't. So you have to juggle the figures and see which one's best. But today we'll have a look at two options. One is renting a car full time, fully inclusive, and the other one we'll have a look at a rent to buy. So the next thing is to look at, what sort of car do I need in taxiing? Well, you have to check with your local authority. The local authorities have different rules on ages and different rules on sizes of cars. But generally, just this bit of reasonable size saloon car will get you through most of it. Even if you're going to go for airport work, one of the things I'm going to be doing is get my own operator's license so I can do airport work. And you don't need a particularly big car to do that. When I first ran, or when I owned and set up flight cabs before it was sold, I thought if I did airport work, I'd need to have a big van, I'd need to carry loads of suitcases, loads of luggage. And the reality is, 95% of the time, you will be able to do it in a normal car, because 95% of the time, you will have one, maybe two passengers, each with a medium-sized suitcase and a carrier. As long as you've got a car that can have two passengers, two medium-sized or two large suitcases and two carry-ons, you'll cover 90% of the airport work out there. The only time you want to have a minibus is if you're going to be taking families on holiday to the airport. There's not a lot of that work around. Families who go on charter flights and charter holidays will normally get a friend or family member to drive them down to the airport, and because it's cheaper. The other thing is, what you'll find is that 5% of families creates 95% of your problems. And I'll explain why that is. Most of your passengers who are one or two are probably going to be business people, they may be students, but they're using scheduled flights. Most of your families are going to be using charter flights. Now, the difference between scheduled flights and charter flights is that airports will always give priority to scheduled flights, because if they don't, the airlines will claim compensation and have penalties to pay. Charter flights tend to be cheaper because they agree to allow the airports to basically just squeeze them in as and when they've got time. And that's what I found when I first started flight cabs. I did do some families, and very quickly I discovered that the delays, the flight delays, were causing me problems with my scheduling. On two occasions, happened quite close together. One flight was delayed by 6 hours. I couldn't wait 6 hours. I had other flights to schedule. I only set aside 2 hour wait time at airports. So a 6 hour flight delay meant I couldn't make my next passengers. So I had to leave them and I went on my next passengers. And when they started saying, well, why aren't you here? I said, well, our contract is for the pickup at X amount of time and a maximum of 2 hour wait. They wait 6 hours. I didn't wait. I couldn't wait. I had other passengers. And that happened a second time. So I very quickly decided that there and then I would never take any more charter flight passengers. Wouldn't take any more holiday makers, wouldn't take any more families, wouldn't take anything that involved a charter flight. And that solved 95% of my scheduling problems straight away and only lost 5% of my passengers. So at most, it's the same with cruise passengers. If you take people down to Southampton or down to Harwich, at most, I only ever took 2 people at a time. And even though they've got no luggage restrictions on cruises, the most they're going to carry is 2 large suitcases each. So that's your size of the car. If you do have a car that can carry 2 passengers and 4 large suitcases, you'll cover 95% of airport work and almost everything to do with cruise lines. So a decent sized saloon car, preferably an estate, is all that you need, even if you're going for airport transfers. So let's have a look at some of the current deals that are on offer, which I'm actually quite interested in. Right, so first of all, let's look at renting it. And that includes everything. That will include your insurance, your servicing, replacement tyres. It'll include breakdown cover, everything that you need. The only thing you'd have to pay is for your fuel. And the only thing you have to pay for is to have your car cleaned, hand washed and valeted. Get it washed 3 times a week, valeted and vacuumed once a week. That's all you have to do. Everything else, licensing and maintenance, it's all included in the rent. I was surprised just how cheap this is. And apart from one reason, and I'll come on to this, I would probably rent full time until I retired. This is with taxi rentals in Cardiff. Most local big areas of metropolitan areas will have companies very similar to this who rent out cars, licensed private hire. These do rentals for Cardiff Borough Council and Newport City Council. And they start off at just £179 a week. So let's look at that. £179 a week, and that's it. Nothing else apart from your fuel and a little bit of hygiene, cleansing. Let's just go to Octavia. Now that's big enough to do 95% of my airport work and almost 100% of any cruise ship work. Fair size boot. I would prefer it to be an estate, but the saloon stroke hatchback is big enough. And I would prefer it to be the Skoda Superb. But, the Octavia is a very comfortable car. Now that includes everything. You have to put down a £200 deposit. Then it's from £179 a week. That's your base pay. You get 850 miles a week miles allowance, which is pretty much okay. I used to do, when I had flight cabs and doing the airport ones, I used to do over 1,000 miles to 1,100 miles. So not too bad. I'm not planning on doing full-time work like I did then. So 850 miles a week, more than sufficient for my needs. So why would I not go for this in the long term? I was certainly looking at doing this for a couple of months when I first start, just to get a feel for Uber and veezu. I couldn't do this full time though, long term, because the insurance only goes up to 65. They'll only insure people up to 65. And obviously I'm looking for something that's going to take me up to 67 when I retire. I'll get my state pension. Together with my normal pension, I won't have to work again. But this will stop at 65, so I'm going to have that 2 years with no earning capability because of no car. And I'll be quite honest, looking at these prices, I would probably go up from the Octavia, and if that's a Hyundai Ioniq 6, that's a very nice car, very nice hybrid. I would possibly go up at that. Or I may even go up to the Kia Niro 2 hybrid, because that's a very nice car as well. So if this did insurance up to 67, then I would probably go for the Nero or the Ionic. I mean, that includes tax, insurance, licensing, AA cover, servicing, spare parts. You've got to rent for a minimum of 8 weeks. That's not a problem because you need 2 to 3 months to get a hang of the Uber system on Bolt. I mean, I'm planning on doing Uber, Bolt and veezu, maybe some Uber Eats and Just Eat, just in case. But I'm only planning on doing maximum 30 hours a week, £179. That works out at about £7 an hour cost. You should about do £7 an hour just to cover your costs without a problem. You add on £15 an hour to earnings, that's £22 an hour you need to be earning. And that's fairly easy to do if you time your shifts right. So that's something that I'd look at. I may look at doing that for 2-3 months while I look for a rental company that will go up to 67 and then swap out for the company to 67. So that's one option, renting. Can't go wrong. You know what you're going to pay out. You know what you're going to earn. Fairly straightforward. And I really can't believe it's this cheap. £179 a week. Incredible value. So let's move on to the next one, which is rent to buy. Right, with rent to buy, you're actually going to have the car at the end of the rental period. You'll keep it. I'm not too concerned over that. What I have at the moment, I've got a van which I'm slowly converting into a camper van, and that's what I'm looking at using when I retire. I don't need to keep a car, but let's have a look. I mean, the one thing you've got to remember is if you're doing 1,000 miles a week, that's 50,000 miles a year. At the end of a 5-year buy to rent period, that car is going to have 250,000 miles on the clock at least. A car that you buy on rent to lease deal is going to be about 27,000. By the end of that 5-year period, it's going to be worth 2,000 or 3,000. There's no value in a car with 250,000 miles on the clock. So the amount you're going to lose is minimal. And with rent, you just don't have any of the aggravation. Because what you'll have to do with these is some of them come with insurance. I'd go for the used model. You know, this MG5 used, I've checked into this, it's an exclusive model with insurance, is £209 a week. Now that's more expensive than that £179 a week Octavia. Now on top of that, you've got to pay for your servicing. On top of that, you've got to pay for windscreen cover because windscreen cover isn't included. There's no recovery included in that, so that's recovery you've got to add on. You've got to set aside for maintenance. You've got to set aside for licensing. So really that £209 is actually going to be closer to £260 a week when you add on all of your extra costs. You might get at the end of it a car worth £3,000, £4,000. But actually it's probably only going to be worth what the battery's worth. Because you're going to have 250,000, 300,000 miles on the clock. So for that reason, that £179 a week rental looks really attractive, even set against rent to buys. But with insurance, £215, but the MG Excite, you can get a used Kona with insurance, £185. That's not too bad. But again, you're going to add on all your extras like your windscreen cover, your licensing, your maintenance, your recovery. So there's a lot more to add on to that weekly. And you need to be a little bit more organised. Personally, I just want something simple, easy, pay my weekly rent, and everything's covered. So at this stage, even though there's some really good deals down at Reflex, they do rentals, but they only rent to London at all. You can get the rent to buyers anywhere in the country, but they'll only do rentals in London. Taxi rentals will do Cardiff plates and Newport plates. At the top for me has to be this Skoda Octavia at 179 a week. Now, if you do 850 miles a week, which I'm not planning on doing, but if you do, it's 20 pence a mile on top. And that's acceptable. So that's my preference for me. Maybe you think it should be something different. Let me know in the comments if you think there's something different that I should be looking at. But someone who's over 60, looking at just topping up the pension, and who don't want to have a lot of aggravation of sorting out their own licensing and insurance and everything else, I think taxi rentals, it's a good deal. I still am really surprised that you can rent a fully insured and licensed private hire vehicle for £180 a week. Gotta be a deal. But that's it. That's a quick look at the sort of things I'm thinking about when I get my car sorted out for when I start with Uber. Of course, because this is a taxi rental company, it means I can multi-app. It's not like renting a car off a taxi company or a private hire company where you can only work for that one company. I could work Uber, veezu and Bolt. No problem. So that's it. A quick guide to what I'm looking at and what I think people need to consider when they look at a car for Uber and Rideshare. So till next time, pleasant travels.